Hello, good morning. I hope that you're well and you've had a good week. We've had a roller coaster of a week, but let's start with all the lovely positive things that have happened this week. And the highlight has to be the release of the beautiful Jane Jackson. This is a stunning sampler. Just look at those beautiful colours and the motifs that this little girl stitched. On this sampler, they glow like beautiful rubies. Such a joy to look at this sampler, and when I sat down to reproduce them, I derived so much pleasure from working with Jane, and I know that Melissa Coyle, who stitched this model, really enjoyed her time with Jane. And Melissa's stitching on this sampler is truly exquisite, and I think that in itself shows how much she enjoyed working on this sampler. Now, Jane didn't leave a date on her sampler or a location of where she lived, so we've not been able to find Jane, so I can't tell you anything about the little girl other than she was a very, very gifted needleworker. We reproduced Jane's sampler with a palette of 20 colours from Auvert Soie's range of Soie d'Alger, but we have included within the booklet a conversion for 103 and DMC. The model was stitched on the Zweigart-based linen that was over-dyed to a shade of parchment by Weeks Dye Works, and this really is a beautiful linen for this sampler. The linen showcases the palette so beautifully. The design area is 299 by 280, so this is a really lovely sized sampler. On 28 count, she's 21.36 by 20 inches. On 36 count, she's 16.61 by 15.56, or on 46 count, which is what the model was stitched on, she is 13 inches by 12.17. Jane used cross stitch over 2 threads with just the serpent in cross stitch over 1 thread. Her verse is all over 2. Those roses, oh, they are so beautiful. You look at this sampler and it draws you in. Now, Jane's sampler is available as a printed booklet or as a PDF download on the Hands Across the Sea Samplers website. But needlework stores around the world also have her booklet, and I know that Hoffman's and Yarn Tree have been busy sending these booklets out to their stores. Enjoy her and you know, please post your progress on Jane. We love seeing our samplers being stitched on social media. It always makes my heart leap a little bit, and I know that Sandra and Lisa feel the same way too. This week I picked up from the photographer a batch of samplers that had been framed and then gone to him for photography. The beautiful Elizabeth Weston was one of those. Now, Elizabeth was released many years ago now, but she's been on display in the United States at the Attic Needleworks, and because she was so big, she had travelled to the States without her frame, and she came back and I had to stretch and lace her and have her put back into her frame. So I took the opportunity to have her rephotographed. Beautiful sampler, and our photographer, he's looked into Elizabeth's soul and really captured that sampler so well. I'm so lucky with our photographer. Dan, for many years, was a photographer in London working in the fashion industry, and he has this wonderful understanding of colour and textures when it comes to textiles. He's come back to Cornwall to live, and I feel so blessed that we have him here to capture our samplers. Elizabeth Weston, I know that so many of you have stitched her, but if you haven't and you would like to, her booklet is available on our website at and from Needlework stores around the world. One of the other samplers I picked up from the photographers is this little girl, Jane Elizabeth Milner, and this is just a simple little primer. You can't buy the chart for this little sampler. This sampler is available as a bonus sampler, a thank you sampler for the Rose Aida Featherstone release. Here is Rose's booklet, and it has a twist. You get, as a thank you, the little chart for Jane's sampler. And we actually found Jane. We know where she was born, where she lived, and we write about her in Rose's booklet. Now, I'm getting a lot of emails saying, we can't find Rose on your website. Well, Rose is an exclusive design for Hobby House Needleworks. She's a limited edition. This little sampler will not be reprinted. It's available now if you want to secure a copy and stitch this beautiful sampler. Now, the little bonus sampler is going to be used in the stitch along that Krista Gramer is running for Rose, and this little sampler is going to be the one that she stitches in the month of January, following the French tradition of having a blessing sampler for the beginning of the year. So the stitch along that Krista is going to be running will start the month of January with Jane, and Jane is going to bless the stitch along and bring you good luck as you stitch Rose, Aida, Featherstone. And this is such a beautiful sampler. The colours are gorgeous. I love these plums and the orange, gorgeous. Now, this is a limited edition, and this booklet has been selling fast. We have printed 1,500 copies, and that is all we're going to print. And that might sound a lot, but when it's around the world, that is not a lot. If you want to secure a copy, now is the time, because when they're gone, they are gone. Now, if you live outside of the United States, and it turns out or works out that it's easier for your booklet to be shipped from the UK, I will be shipping booklets from the UK. For example, if you live in Australia, United States are not shipping to Australia at the moment, but you can still order this because I will ship this from the UK. So if you don't live in the United States, just contact Hobby House Needleworks by email, and they will give you the pricing for shipping from the UK, and we will sort that out with pleasure for you. Talking about stitch-alongs, the stitch-along started on October the 1st for Eliza Martha Linfoot, and what the ladies and gentlemen stitching this sampler has realised is that the border is not evenly counted. The vast majority of samplers stitched by little girls have anomalies in them, and often their borders, they miscounted in parts of them, or they squished them in to make them meet up when they got their maths wrong. When you start to stitch a sampler, it's well worth spending time on preparation. And preparation is not just preparing your silks and your linen, it's preparing yourself. You need to study the chart. One of the first things I do when I reproduce a sampler, or if I was stitching a sampler I have not reproduced, is I count around the border, marking down how many are on the diagonal, how many are on the horizontal, all the way around, and that way I catch any anomalies before I start. It's time well spent. It can save you a lot of time unpicking at as you've sort of spent maybe a couple of days on a sampler. So it's well worth spending that time. This week, on social media, a few people, and it's funny how things come in batches, have asked us a question by making a post on social media. That's not the way to contact us. I actually spend very little time on social media. I don't know what it is about Facebook, but my news feed is an absolute mess. I seem to have so much rubbish in my news feed, all these adverts for, goodness knows what. It looks as if I look up something on Google, like dog blankets, and all of a sudden everything that comes up in my news feed is dog related or something like that. So, going back to the point I'm trying to make, if you want to contact us to ask us something, please do so by sending us an email. If you haven't got our email address to hand, if you go to our website, there is a contact form that you can complete. That way you know that we receive your question, and if we know that you need help, we will always respond to you. So please, if you need us, contact us via email, not by social media. What else? Well, last week I showed you some beautiful linen that had been overdyed by my friend Michelle Moulin-White, and her linen is sold under the name of Tabby Cat through her website, Mill on the Floss Samplers. And I wanted to show you this linen actually being stitched on. So here is a piece of linen that I cut off, and it's got this beautiful grunginess to us that Michelle has worked on perfecting. And I was so pleased with the overdye of the linen that she sent me. It's so good for reproduction samplers. Now, I know that you look at overdye and you think, oh my God, that looks awful. But as you start to stitch on it, look how it just blends in, and you know, it's a beautiful canvas on which to paint your sampler. It really, really is. It showcases the samplers so well. This is a very pretty sampler. I loved stitching this border. Now, I posted a photograph of this on Friday night, and I had stitched the outer border and the sawtooth border, and I had just done this bottom row. Last night I sat down and I stitched the rest of the vine, and it met up perfectly. The person who stitched this sampler was very, very good with their counting. They were spot on. I'm trying to choose my words carefully about the person who stitched this sampler, because it has a little twist. You wouldn't necessarily think of this person as stitching a sampler, but I'm going to keep that until the end. The photograph I posted on Friday night, it didn't really represent the colours very well. Red looked a really sort of deep red, but it's not. It's a beautiful sort of raspberry. It's probably not showing very true on this lens either. It's so hard to capture true colour through the lens of a camera. But this is actually a really beautiful raspberry, and this is a lovely sort of jade green. Very, very pretty. Unusual colours, but these are the colours on the front of the sampler today. I'm really looking forward tonight to sit down and add these flower heads. Really, really pretty. Go along to Mill on the Floss Samplers website and have a look at Michelle's linen. You won't be disappointed. I can't wait for more colours to come. Michelle, don't forget, I want some more colours to use. It's so important that you have the right materials to work with when you're stitching reproduction samplers. Okay, so this week I had an antique sampler arrive that I had bought at auction. And with the sampler I wanted to buy, there were another 2 items of needlework in the lot, and I didn't really want to buy them, but they have come, and they are sort of, well, this one is army based. It's a beautiful embroidery of a badge, and on the back of the sampler it says it was worked by his wife to mark the service of Major O. Wright Holmes in this corps in England, India and Burma, 1942 to 1946. So my love of history means I'm going to be researching Major Wright Holmes and his wife who stitched this sampler. What a lovely gift for his wife to give him. And isn't it such a shame that this ended up for sale? Like Major Wright and his wife have probably died. If he served in the 40s, you know, I would be surprised if somebody who had reached the rank of Major, which sort of means maturity, is still alive. And it's such a shame that a family or their family didn't want to keep this. I need to find the right sort of home for this now, and if anybody has any ideas of who would appreciate this, please let me know. I don't want this to end up on a skip and, you know, to be destroyed. Too much work and love went into that. There was also another little piece of needlework, and this has all been beautifully stitched in needlepoint, and I would very much like to know what these flags are, and if you know, please leave a message, and again, if I can find out what they mean, maybe I can find a home where it would be appreciated, so please let me know. The postman also brought some other gifts this week. Well, not gifts, I actually bought this. Mary Corbett of Needle and Thread did a wonderful review of this book, and it just sort of, I thought, oh gosh, this is a book I have got to have. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book about Opus Anglicanum, which is English needlework from the Middle Ages. And it's beautiful, and there are some patterns in here, and there are some really, really good instructions of how to stitch this form of needlework. Go along and have a look at Mary Corbett's website, Needle and Thread. I'm sure that most of you already subscribe to her newsletter, but Mary's newsletters, they are a joy. You will learn so much from this lady who is an amazing embroiderer. And I'm not going to talk any more about this book. Read Mary's review. It's in depth, and it's a beautiful book to add to your needlework library. The postman did bring me a gift, and that is the printed booklet for Krista Gramer of Just Stitching Along's latest release. And this is a lovely little booklet. It's clean, it's easy on the eye. You've got this beautiful charting, you've got the bonus font and graph paper to add your own initials to this sampler. This little girl didn't put her name, she put her initials, TGA, and what Krista has suggested that if you wanted to, you could put your own initials here instead, and she's provided you with the means for doing that by charting out the font for this particular alphabet and providing you with some graph paper. Krista has an Etsy store where you can get copies of her samplers via PDF download, but her booklets are available from needlework stores around the world. If you would like a copy of this, just let your needlework store know and they can order these through Hoffman's distributors. Now, we've talked about receiving things, but I have been very, very busy shipping the booklets for Esther Blackwood to Traditional Stitches in Canada, and Janice is now gearing up to start shipping these booklets out to needleworkers around the world. I am so thrilled how this booklet came out. I'm so pleased that my printers actually, when they reprinted it, got these graph lines correct. When I received the first batch of these, they'd had a problem with the bold lines on the graph, but now that's all corrected, and this is an absolutely beautiful booklet. I'm so pleased. The booklets, they are a joy to put together. They can be stressful at times, but I love sort of doing these as a sort of tribute to these little girls. So often women are just forgotten by history. They're totally overlooked. But these are little tributes to those girls, and I get a lot of joy doing them. So, if you are taking part in this stitch along, it won't be too much longer before you start to receive your booklet and supplies. Do I have anything else to talk about? I think that might be it. Needlework-wise, so many of you have contacted me this week about Ray. Ray had his appointment with the consultant on October the 6th, Wednesday, and we didn't get the news that we were hoping we were going to get. They had warned us that there might be a problem with Ray's bones healing because of this underlying condition that he has. And when we saw the consultant, there really isn't any evidence that his bones, the breaks, are healing. The hospital this week have started, or they have a new machine where they're doing an x-ray or a scan in a different way. So Ray had this new scan x-ray carried out, and when we go back in 4 weeks' time, this will be the starting point now for them to compare any healing in his bones. Ray asked them what happens if they don't heal, and they can't operate. Because of this underlying condition, his bones apparently are like chalk, and they can't put any sort of screws in because the bones will just crumble or will just sort of flake off or shear off. We don't know what's going to happen. Your prayers would be appreciated. We just have to wait and see in 4 weeks' time if there is any progress with those bones healing. But we are going to live our lives with gratitude in our hearts that Ray's with us and that he's not paralysed. The consultant said he has an unstable injury, he has to wear his collar, a micro movement without his collar on could cause a paralysis. But, you know, okay, he can't drive, he can't play golf, but there are other things that we can do to enjoy ourselves. And I was going to London a week Saturday because I'm going to see the handbag exhibition at the V&A with a girlfriend. I can't leave Ray, so Ray is going to come with me, and we're going to have a great time having a little mini holiday in London. You've got to look at life that your glass is half full, not half empty. You've got to make the most of things. And we have so many blessings to our life. And one of those blessings are our dogs. When we went to see the consultant, because it's a long drive, we decided that we would go and stay in a hotel the night before. And we decided that we would take Hugo with us, just to see what he was like, you know, staying away from home. Now, our friends always look after our dogs, so Gary, rather than us leave Bertie in the house, Gary took Bertie out for a walk so that we could leave after Bertie had gone out. And when Hugo was separated from Bertie, he was really quite anxious, and as we put him into the car, we realised that Hugo had never been in the car without Bertie, ever in his life. Well, except for when we drove back from London, having picked him up as a puppy. But he was such a good boy, and the hotel that we stayed in, they adored dogs, and they made a huge fuss of him, and he was good as gold. And even in the restaurant while we were eating, he just lay there. Now, my dogs are used to going into restaurants, and they know they have to lay there. And he did that without Bertie, and he was a good boy in our room, and it was just a total pleasure to have him with us. And when Ray went into his appointment at the hospital, I couldn't go in because of COVID regulations. So Hugo and I had a lovely walk around the grounds of the hospital, and then we sat outside waiting for Ray to come out. And Hugo was sat there and he was fascinated. Where we live, it's very quiet, and the hospital was bustling. You know, there was cars and taxis and ambulances and buses, and people getting off buses, getting on buses, you know, all sorts of people walking back and forth. And he sat there and his head was like this, and, you know, he was just so engaged with watching what was going on. And do you know what? He spotted Ray coming out of the hospital before I did. When we got back home and the two dogs were back together, they were so excited to see each other. They are inseparable, and they are such a blessing to our lives. Anyway, because Ray and I are away next weekend, there won't be a Flosstube next weekend. But when I get to see the handbag exhibition, I do hope to be able to share some photographs of that and you know, share that experience with you. Thank you to everybody for listening to me each week. It always amazes me that you do want to listen to me sort of chat on, sometimes about nothing. But it's lovely to be able to share needlework with you. Needlework is such a huge part of my life, and it very much keeps me on an even keel with my sanity. This sampler this week, it's just been a blessing to have this to focus on while my brain's been in overtime. I often get asked about the back of my samplers. That's the back of this sampler. If you stitch neatly on the back, I do think it reflects in the front of your sampler. I've used a pin stitch to start all my threads off. I'm not a huge fan of pin stitch for finishing on cross stitch, other than if there is nowhere for me to bury my threads. So next time I do a Flosstube, I hope to have a lot more of this beautiful sampler to show you. Until next week, stay safe, until 2 weeks time, stay safe, stay well. Bye-bye.